The voice on the radio warned me about a curve, before I could even see it. Then it told me about the deer. Then it told me not to look to my left. That's when I realized something was guiding me through this road, and it knew it better than I ever could. I didn't plan to drive through western Kansas that night. No one ever really plans to. It's just something that happens when you're trying to outrun a deadline, a memory, or yourself. For me, it was all three. My name is Daniel Harker, and at the time, I was 34 years old, newly divorced, and working a logistics job that paid well enough to keep me numb. That night, I was driving eastbound on Interstate 70, just outside the small town of Colby, Kansas, a real place I'd passed through a dozen times before without ever stopping. Flat land, endless sky, nothing to hold your attention except the road and your thoughts. I had left Denver later than I should have, chasing a delivery window in Kansas City that I couldn't afford to miss. My boss had made that clear. Miss it again, and I'd be looking for work somewhere else. That was my motivation. Simple, practical, desperate. I told myself it was just another overnight haul, another long stretch of asphalt, another podcast, another thermos of burnt coffee. I told myself nothing strange ever happens on highways like this. I was wrong. The first thing I noticed was the mile marker. Mile 312. A green reflective sign on the right shoulder, slightly bent, dirt at the base, illuminated for just a second by my headlights as I passed it. I remember it clearly because I glanced at my dashboard clock right after 11:43 p.m. I still had over 200 miles to go, and the road ahead was empty in that uniquely unsettling way. Highways get after midnight, when traffic thins out and the world feels like it's holding its breath. The radio was tuned to a local AM station, low and crackly, mostly static and farm, reports that felt out of place at that hour. I drove on. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I kept my speed steady, around 75, cruise control locked. The hum of the tires and the white dashed lines slipping beneath me created that hypnotic rhythm every night driver knows. I reached for my coffee, took a sip, grimaced at how cold it had already become. Then my headlights caught another green sign on the right. Mile 312. I frowned. That was my first real reaction: confusion, not fear. My immediate thought was that I'd misread it the first time, or that this stretch of road had multiple markers with the same number for some maintenance reason I didn't understand. I checked the GPS mounted to my windshield. It showed me moving east, the little blue arrow inching along the line, the distance to Kansas City slowly ticking down. Everything looked normal. Still, something about it nagged at me. I checked the clock again, 12:06 a.m. That didn't make sense. I should have passed at least 2 or 3 mile markers by now. I told myself not to overthink it. Long drives mess with your perception. Fatigue plays tricks on your eyes. I turned the radio up slightly, letting the sound fill the cab so my thoughts wouldn't. A man's voice came through the static, calm and detached, talking about overnight temperatures dropping below freezing in Sherman County. I wasn't in Sherman County anymore. I hadn't been for a while. I glanced at the GPS again. Still moving, still east. Another 15 minutes passed. I know this because I remember the song, or what passed for a song on that station ending, followed by a brief stretch of dead air. The road ahead remained perfectly straight, disappearing into darkness. my headlights carving out a narrow tunnel through the night. Then, once again, there it was, mile 312. Same bend, same dirt at the base, same reflective scuffs. My stomach tightened in a way I didn't like. This time, I slowed down slightly as I passed it. My eyes locked on the sign longer than before, as if it might change if I stared hard enough. It didn't. I felt a chill crawl up my arms, despite the heater humming steadily. I told myself the GPS had to be wrong, or the mile markers were, or I was more tired than I realized. I considered pulling over, but the shoulder was narrow and unlit, and the idea of stopping out there alone, surrounded by nothing but fields I couldn't see, made my skin prickle. So I kept driving. The radio crackled again, the same man's voice returning. "For drivers traveling eastbound tonight," he said, "exercise caution. Conditions may change unexpectedly." That was it. No elaboration. No traffic report. Just that. I laughed under my breath, a short, humorless sound. "Yeah," I muttered to the empty cab. No kidding. Another glance at the clock. 12:41 a.m. I felt a spike of irritation then, the fear still simmering under the surface, but masked by anger. I prided myself on being rational. I dealt in routes, schedules, numbers. There had to be an explanation. I pressed the accelerator, pushing the speed up to 85. The engine responded smoothly, the road still empty ahead. I counted the minutes in my head. 5 minutes. 10. My headlights swept over the shoulder. Mile 312. I slammed my foot off the gas without thinking, the sudden deceleration jolting me forward in my seat. My heart was pounding now, loud enough that I could hear it over the engine. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't a mistake. I had driven nearly 30 miles since the first time I saw that sign. There was no way. I grabbed my phone and unlocked it, ignoring the low battery warning. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here, but combined with everything else, it felt like another thread tightening around me. I zoomed in on the GPS app. The map stuttered, then froze. The blue arrow stopped moving altogether, even though the road beneath me clearly hadn't. I felt a sudden, irrational urge to turn around, just get off the highway. Find a town, a gas station, anything. I scanned the darkness for an exit sign. There were none. Just the endless road and that damned mile marker repeating itself like a bad dream. I tried the radio again, twisting the dial, cycling through static and distant voices that faded in and out. Every station sounded wrong, slightly out of sync, like recordings playing from too far away. Finally, the same AM station came back. Same voice. "You've passed this before," the man said. I froze. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. "If you're listening," the voice continued, "you already know that." My mouth went dry. "This is just a broadcast," I whispered. "Just coincidence." But my voice sounded thin and unconvincing, even to me. The road began to feel different then. It's hard to explain, but the darkness seemed heavier, pressing in on the windshield, swallowing the edges of my headlights. The dashed white lines looked closer together somehow, like the road itself was subtly wrong. I thought about my ex-wife then, about the last conversation we'd had before she packed her things. She told me I was always in motion, always chasing the next thing, never really present. "You don't know how to stop," she'd said. The memory hit me with surprising force, And for a moment, grief cut through my fear, sharp and raw. Another mile marker loomed ahead. I didn't want to look, but I did. Mile 312. I screamed then. A short, involuntary sound ripped from my throat. I swerved slightly, the tires humming dangerously close to the rumble strip before I corrected. My breathing came fast and shallow. "Okay," I said out loud. "Okay. I'm stopping." I pulled onto the shoulder despite my fear, gravel crunching under the tires. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming. No wind, no insects, just the ticking of cooling metal and my own ragged breathing. I stepped out of the truck, the night air biting at my face. The stars overhead were bright, painfully sharp. The Milky Way stretching across the sky in a way you never see near cities. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like I was standing under a glass dome, sealed in. The mile marker stood a few yards ahead, illuminated by my headlights. I walked toward it, each step hesitant. Up close, it looked old, more weathered than it should have been. Scratches, faded paint. I ran my fingers over the numbers. 3, 1, 2. They felt rough, uneven. I stepped past it, counting my steps, then turned back. The marker was behind me, as expected. Relief flooded through me, sudden and intense. "See?" I whispered to myself. "It's real. You're just losing it." I walked farther, 50 yards down the road, then turned again. The marker was gone. My headlights no longer illuminated it. My stomach dropped. I spun in a slow circle, scanning the shoulder, the ditch, the road behind me. Nothing. Then, behind me, an engine coughed to life. I jumped, heart leaping into my throat, and turned toward the sound. My truck's engine was running. The headlights were on. I was sure I'd turned it off. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at me to get back inside, even as another part of me wanted to run as far as I could into the darkness. The radio crackled on its own. "You don't stop here," the voice said gently. "No one does." I stumbled back into the cab and slammed the door. My hands shaking so badly, I fumbled the keys, even though they were already in the ignition. The truck was in drive. I don't remember putting it there. I hit the gas, pulling back onto the highway, tears blurring my vision. I drove. I don't know how long. Time stopped meaning anything. The clock flickered between numbers that didn't make sense. 12, 58, 12, 12, 12:43, never moving forward. The radio went silent. The GPS stayed frozen. And every few minutes, like a cruel reminder, the mile marker appeared again. Mile 312. Always the same. Always waiting. My fear shifted then, slowly, into something heavier. Resignation. I thought about all the times I'd pushed myself past exhaustion. All the nights I'd chosen the road over rest, over people. I wondered, in some detached part of my mind, if this was what it meant to finally hit a limit, not a physical one, but something deeper. The road didn't care how fast I drove or how far I thought I'd come. It wasn't going to let me leave. Eventually, the sky began to lighten, a pale gray creeping in at the horizon. Dawn. I felt a fragile spark of hope. Surely daylight would break whatever hold this place had on me. As the sun rose, the world regained its color. The fields became visible, brown and empty. The road looked normal again. And there, on the right shoulder, stood the mile marker, 312. I laughed then, a hollow sound. I pulled over one last time, exhaustion washing over me in a crushing wave. My eyes burned. My head throbbed. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and closed my eyes. Just for a second. When I opened them, there were flashing lights in my mirrors. Red and blue. A state trooper's car pulled up behind me. Relief hit me so hard I nearly sobbed. I stepped out, my legs weak. "Officer," I said, my voice cracking. "I need help. I've been stuck here all night." He looked at me strangely. "Sir," he said slowly, "you've been parked here since about 11:30. My stomach dropped. "That's impossible," I said. "I've been driving. I've passed this marker dozens of times." He glanced at the sign beside us, mile 312. "You ran out of gas," he said. "Happens. Especially if you leave your engine running." I looked back at my truck. The fuel gauge sat on empty. I didn't remember it getting that low. "How long?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Your odometer says you added about 120 miles, he said. "But the truck hasn't moved." I stared at the numbers, my mind reeling. The officer cleared his throat. "You're lucky," he added. "Another driver found you this morning and called it in. Said it looked like you'd been through something." I wanted to tell him everything. About the road, the voice, the marker that never changed. But the words stuck in my throat. He wouldn't believe me. No one would. They towed my truck into Colby. I rented a room and slept for nearly a day. When I woke up, the first thing I did was check the news. Nothing. No reports. No missing drivers. Just another quiet day in western Kansas. I finished my delivery late. I kept my job. Life went on. But I don't drive at night anymore. And every so often, when I close my eyes, I see that green sign in my headlights. Mile 312. Still waiting. The first time I noticed the headlights, I told myself not to overreact. That's important to understand, because fear didn't come all at once. It arrived slowly, layered, the way it usually does in real life. My name is Lauren Whitaker. I'm 31 years old, and at the time this happened, I was living in a small rental outside Marfa, Texas. I worked nights at a regional medical lab in Alpine, the kind of place that processed blood samples and toxicology reports for half the county. The pay was decent, the hours were brutal, and the drive home nearly 60 miles of two-lane highway through open desert was something I'd learned to endure rather than enjoy. I took Highway 90 east every night, leaving the lab around 12:20 a.m., thermos of coffee in the cup holder, radio low, windows cracked just enough to keep me alert. It was lonely driving, but predictable. That night felt no different at first. I left Alpine on time, past the same dark stretches of scrub and rock, the same occasional reflective eyes of animals caught in my headlights. About 20 minutes in, somewhere between Valentine and Marfa, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a pair of headlights far behind me. Just two small points of white light floating in the darkness. That alone meant nothing. Cars traveled that road at all hours. Ranchers, truckers, border patrol. I didn't give it another thought. The road was straight, flat, stretching ahead like a ribbon laid across the earth. I drove at a steady 65, my thoughts drifting to mundane things. Bills, an argument I'd had with my sister earlier that week. The way my life felt stalled despite how hard I worked. That sense of being stuck had been with me for a while, and I didn't realize then how perfectly the night was about to reflect it back at me. I checked the mirror again maybe 10 minutes later. The headlights were closer now. Not right on my bumper, but noticeably nearer. I shrugged it off. Maybe they were just driving faster. Maybe I was slowing without realizing it. I adjusted my speed slightly, nudging it up to 70. The headlights stayed where they were. That was the first subtle hook, the first thread my mind caught on. I watched them for a few seconds longer than necessary. They didn't weave or bob the way headlights usually do when a car shifts lanes or hits uneven pavement. They were steady, level, patient. I told myself to stop staring. I focused on the road ahead again, the hum of the tires filling the car, the darkness pressing in on both sides like an ocean. The radio murmured softly some late-night talk show out of El Paso. The host's voice low and conversational, discussing border weather patterns. It was oddly soothing. I checked the mirror again. Same distance. Same lights. I felt a faint tightening in my chest. Not fear yet. More like curiosity mixed with unease. The kind of feeling you get when something doesn't quite follow the rules you expect it to. I sped up again, this time more deliberately. 75. The speed limit signs flashed past, reflective and brief. The headlights didn't fall back. They didn't gain ground either. They stayed locked in place, as if tethered to me by an invisible line. I laughed softly to myself, a reflex more than genuine humor. "You're tired," I said out loud. That's all. I reached for my coffee, took a sip, and grimaced. Cold, bitter. I rolled the window down a little farther, letting the dry night air rush in, carrying the faint smell of dust and sage. The road curved gently, then straightened again. No passing lanes, no turnoffs, just darkness and asphalt. I checked the mirror again. Still there. My heart rate picked up slightly. I slowed down this time, easing off the accelerator. 60. 55. The headlights slowed too, maintaining that same precise distance. That's when a real chill ran through me, sharp and unmistakable. This wasn't coincidence. Or, if it was a coincidence that refused to resolve itself. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I glanced at the clock. 12:58 a.m. Less than half an hour since I'd left work, yet it felt longer somehow. I thought about pulling over, but the shoulder was narrow and uneven, and the idea of stopping out there, alone, with that car behind me, made my stomach knot. I tried to rationalize it again. Maybe they were just matching my speed. Maybe they were cautious, didn't want to pass on a dark road. That explanation held for a few miles, then began to crumble. We reached a long, straight stretch where visibility extended far ahead. Plenty of room to pass. I waited, my breath held without realizing it. The headlights didn't move. They didn't drift into the oncoming lane. They didn't brighten or dim. They just stayed, watching. The radio crackled suddenly, the talk show cutting out mid-sentence, replaced by static. I reached to adjust the dial, but before I could, a woman's voice came through, calm, clear. "Drivers on Highway 90, she said, use caution tonight." My hand froze. That was it. No station ID, no explanation, just that sentence, hanging in the air. The radio fell silent again. I stared at it, then slowly looked back up at the road. The headlights were closer now. Not by much, but enough that I could feel it, like someone stepping just inside your personal space. My breathing grew shallow. I thought about my mother, about how she'd always hated these drives, always warned me about being on the road alone at night. People disappear out there, she'd said once, only half joking. I'd laughed it off then. I wasn't laughing now. I pressed the accelerator again, harder this time. 80, 85. The engine whined in protest, but I didn't ease up. The headlights stayed with me, perfectly matched, as if speed meant nothing to them. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, more from frustration than fear. "What do you want?" I said aloud, my voice trembling. The desert offered no answer. Ahead, a sign appeared. Gas food lodging next right. Valentine. Relief surged through me, so fast it was dizzying. Valentine was barely a town, a few buildings, a gas station, a diner, but it was light. People, witnesses. I signaled and turned off the highway, gravel crunching under my tires as I slowed. For a brief, glorious second, the headlights behind me disappeared as I made the turn. I exhaled a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "That's it," I whispered. "It's over." I pulled into the gas station lot, parking under the harsh, fluorescent lights. The place was open, a lone attendant visible through the window, flipping through a magazine. I cut the engine and sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel, waiting for my pulse to slow. After a minute, I glanced toward the road. My heart dropped. The headlights were there, just at the edge of the lot, stationary, pointed toward me. No car body visible, just light. They didn't pull in. They didn't move. They watched. A wave of dread washed over me, cold and heavy. I forced myself out of the car and walked toward the store, every step feeling exposed. The attendant looked up as I entered. "Evenin'," he said casually. I tried to return the greeting, but my voice caught. "There's a car out there," I said, nodding toward the window. "Has it been sitting there long?" He glanced outside, squinting. "Don't see any car," he said. "Just the highway." My stomach twisted. I turned and looked. The headlights were gone. The road beyond the lot was empty and dark. "It was just there," I insisted, my voice sounding too loud in the small space. The attendant raised an eyebrow, concern flickering across his face. "You okay, ma'am?" "I'm just tired," I said quickly. The lie automatic. Long shift. He nodded, sympathy replacing suspicion. I bought a bottle of water I didn't need, just to have an excuse to linger. When I finally left, I told myself it was done, that whatever I'd experienced had stayed on the highway. I pulled back onto the road, merging carefully, my eyes darting to the mirrors. For a few minutes, there was nothing behind me. I began to relax, the tension slowly unwinding. Then, like a cruel punchline, the headlights appeared again. Same distance, same brightness. My breath hitched. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I tried something different then. I slowed to a crawl, nearly stopping in the middle of the road. The headlights slowed too, never closing the gap. I sped up, then slowed again, my movements erratic, desperate. The lights mirrored me perfectly, like a reflection that refused to break. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course, the radio remained silent no matter how much I twisted the dial. The world felt reduced to just me, my car, and those lights. I thought about turning around, about heading back toward Valentine, but something deep in my gut told me it wouldn't matter. Wherever I went, they'd be there. The road ahead blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I felt small then, painfully so, like a child being followed home in the dark. The miles crawled by. Time lost meaning. At some point, I realized I'd stopped checking the clock because I was afraid of what it might tell me. The landscape didn't change. The road didn't change. Neither did the headlights. Fatigue crept in, heavy and dangerous. My eyelids burned. My thoughts grew sluggish. I caught myself drifting toward the shoulder and jerked the wheel back, heart racing. "Stay awake," I muttered. "Just stay awake." The headlights flared brighter for a moment, and I gasped, convinced they were finally closing in. But they stopped at that same impossible distance. I began to understand then that this wasn't about catching me. It was about staying with me. The thoughts settled over me like a weight. Ahead, I saw the faint glow of Marfa's lights on the horizon. Home. Safety. Tears spilled freely now. Relief and terror tangled together. I pushed myself harder, the engine straining as I neared town. Streetlights appeared. Buildings. Familiar landmarks. As I passed the Marfa city limits sign, I glanced in the mirror. The headlights were gone, just empty road. A sob tore out of me, half laugh, half cry. I drove straight home, pulled into my driveway, and sat there for a long time before I could make myself get out. I barely slept that day, exhaustion dragging me under despite the lingering fear. When I woke in the late afternoon, sunlight streaming through the blinds, everything felt distant, unreal. I told myself it had been stress, fatigue, a trick of the dark. That night, I considered calling in sick. I almost did, but rent was due, and life has a way of pushing you forward, whether you're ready or not. I left for work as usual. The drive-in was uneventful, normal. I relaxed a little, the previous night beginning to feel like a bad dream. My shift ended just after midnight. I hesitated in the parking lot, keys in hand, dread coiling in my stomach. Get a grip, I told myself. I started the car and headed out. The desert greeted me with its familiar darkness. 20 minutes in, I checked the mirror. Nothing. I let out a breath. Another 10 minutes. Still nothing. I was almost smiling when, just past Valentine, 2 points of light bloomed behind me. Perfectly spaced, perfectly steady. I screamed then, the sound raw and unrestrained. I knew, with a certainty that hollowed me out, that this wasn't something that ended. It was something you learned to live with, or didn't. I made it home again. Somehow, I don't remember the drive. Just the lights. And the feeling of being accompanied by something that didn't need a car. Didn't need a reason. I quit my job a week later. Took a day shift in town. I don't drive Highway 90 at night anymore. But sometimes, when I'm stopped at a red light after dark, I see them in my mirror. 2 headlights. Waiting, not passing. I didn't believe in omens before that night. I believed in planning, schedules, and the kind of logic you develop when your life depends on making the right turn at the right mile. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 36 when this happened, living in a rented duplex on the outskirts of Beckley, West Virginia. I worked as an insurance field adjuster, which meant long drives through back roads and mountain highways, documenting accidents and storm damage no one else wanted to deal with. I'd grown used to night driving, especially through Appalachia, where the roads twist and fold back on themselves like something alive. That night, I was heading home late after finishing a claim near Lewisburg. It was close to 11:50 p.m. when I merged onto US Route 60, a stretch of road locals warned outsiders about, but rarely explained. My motivation was simple: get home before exhaustion made decisions for me. My wife had left 3 months earlier, not in a dramatic way, just quietly, telling me she was tired of living with someone who was always somewhere else. I told myself driving was the only thing that still made sense. The road was familiar, but familiarity doesn't mean safety, especially at night. Fog hung low between the hills, thinning and thickening in patches. The forest pressed close on both sides, trees tall and skeletal, their branches forming dark arches over the asphalt. I turned on the radio mostly to have company. The FM stations were nothing but static, so I switched to AM, landing on a local broadcast I didn't recognize. The sound was warm, analog, slightly distorted, like an old tape playing somewhere far away. A man's voice came through, calm and measured, with no trace of accent strong enough to place. "Good evening," he said. "If you're traveling Route 60 tonight, take it slow." I barely registered it at first. Late-night radio often sounded strange, especially out here. I adjusted my speed, easing down a few miles per hour as the road narrowed. The headlights carved through the fog in short, uncertain bursts. A minute later, the voice returned. "Sharp curve ahead," he said. "Don't hug the center line." I frowned, instinctively easing right as the road bent hard to the left. My tires hit the curve smoothly, no drift, no sudden correction. That wasn't unusual. The curves on Route 60 were infamous. Still, something about the timing bothered me. The voice hadn't said, "in a mile," or "coming up." It had said it like it was already happening. I told myself it was coincidence. Pattern-seeking brain. That's all. I drove on. The fog thickened again, swallowing the trees until they became little more than shadows. My phone buzzed with a low battery warning. No signal. That was normal here. I glanced at the clock. 12:07 a.m. The road climbed steadily, engine humming low. The radio crackled softly between sentences. "Watch for deer," the voice said. "They cross here." Almost immediately, a shape moved at the edge of my headlights. I hit the brakes hard, heart leaping into my throat, as a deer bounded across the road, disappearing into the trees. I sat there for a second, foot still on the brake, breathing fast. "Okay," I muttered. "Okay." My hands were shaking. I looked at the radio, as if it might look back. "That's still coincidence," I said aloud, forcing the words to sound confident. "These roads are predictable." The voice came back, quieter this time. "Not always," it said. I laughed then, a sharp, brittle sound. "Real funny," I said. "Whoever's running this station." I reached for the dial, intending to change it, but static swallowed every other frequency. When I turned back, the same station came through, clear as before. "You won't get anything else out here," the voice said gently. My pulse quickened. "You shouldn't know that," I whispered. The road dipped, then leveled out. A faded sign flashed past. Kanawha County Line. I'd driven this stretch dozens of times. I knew where the curves were. I knew where the pavement cracked and where the guardrails felt too thin. And yet, the voice kept getting ahead of me. "Slow down," it said, seconds before a patch of slick pavement glistened under my headlights. "Don't look to your left," it warned, just before a steep drop appeared where the guardrail had been partially torn away. Each time, my body reacted before my mind caught up. obeying without thinking. Fear crept in gradually, not as panic but as a cold awareness settling into my bones. This voice wasn't guessing. It wasn't reacting. It was anticipating. I thought about turning around, but Route 60 offered few places to do that safely, especially at night. And some irrational part of me didn't want to stop listening. There was comfort in it, twisted as that sounds. It felt like someone else was carrying the burden of the road for me. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, finally. My voice sounded small in the enclosed space of the car. The radio hissed softly before the man replied. "You needed company," he said. "You always do." That hit harder than anything else he'd said. I swallowed, my throat tight. "You don't know me," I said. "I know the way you grip the steering wheel when you're tired." The voice replied. "I know you haven't slept through the night since March. I know you still slow down near mile marker 32. Even though the crash there was cleaned up years ago." My stomach dropped. That crash had been mine. A drunk driver, a totaled car, a night I rarely talked about. No record tied it to me personally. I felt exposed, like the forest itself was leaning in to listen. "Turn the radio off," I said, my voice trembling. I reached for the power knob and twisted it hard. The screen went dark. Silence filled the car. I exhaled shakily, relief washing over me in a wave so strong it made my eyes sting. I focused on the road, forcing myself to breathe slowly. The fog thinned, the sky above barely visible through the canopy. I started to believe I'd imagined it all. Then a voice spoke from behind me. Not through the radio. "Don't relax yet," it said. My blood ran cold. I stared straight ahead, afraid to move. The voice sounded closer now, lower, as if it were sitting just behind my right shoulder. "You're not home," it continued. "And you're not alone." I shook my head violently. "This isn't real," I said. "I'm exhausted. That's all." The headlights flickered. The dashboard lights dimmed, then returned. The radio screen lit up on its own. The voice came through it again, layered now, both inside the car and all around it. "Exhaustion opens doors," it said. "These roads remember everyone who's driven them long enough." The road ahead curved sharply. I hadn't slowed. "Brake," the voice commanded. I did, hard. Just as my headlights caught the edge of a fallen tree, partially blocking the lane. I skidded to a stop inches away, chest heaving. If I hadn't listened, I would have wrapped the car around a trunk at full speed. I sat there, shaking uncontrollably. Gratitude and terror tangled together until I couldn't tell them apart. "What are you?" I asked hoarsely. There was a pause, long enough that I thought it might not answer. "I'm what stays," the voice said finally, "when drivers don't." I stared into the darkness beyond my headlights, suddenly aware of how many memorial crosses dotted these roads, how many stories ended quietly between towns. "You're dead," I whispered. "Some of us," the voice replied. "Some of us never left." I drove the rest of the way in near silence, the voice only speaking when it had to, warning me of a blind curve, a washout near the shoulder, a sudden drop in elevation that made my ears pop. Each warning was precise, personal. By the time the lights of Beckley appeared ahead, my hands ached from gripping the wheel. "This is where I get off," the voice said softly. "What happens if I turn you off again?" I asked. The radio crackled. "You already know the road now," it replied. "That's how it works." I pulled into my driveway, and killed the engine. The night felt too quiet, like something had been switched off in the world itself. I sat there for a long time before going inside. The radio was dark, unplugged. I slept for a few hours, dreamless and heavy. In the morning, I told myself I'd never drive Route 60 at night again. I meant it. For a while, I kept that promise. Weeks passed, then months. Life settled into something like normal. One evening, a storm knocked out power across half the county. I got a call from my supervisor, asking if I could check a site near Lewisburg. Just this once. I left earlier that time. Before full dark, the road felt different in daylight, less oppressive. Still, as dusk fell and shadows lengthened, I felt that familiar tension return. I turned the radio on without thinking. Static. Then a voice. "You're taking the long way today," it said. I closed my eyes for a second, heart sinking. "I didn't ask for this," I said quietly. The voice didn't sound apologetic. "Neither did the road," it replied. The trees blurred past. The curves came and went. And once again, the voice knew them all before I did.